Enquanto você curte um som, a ClearSale cuida da segurança antifraude de mais de 100 mil empresas em todo o mundo. Só falta a sua. Fale com os nossos especialistas e fique um passo à frente das fraudes e riscos de crédito. Encontre soluções flexíveis que se adaptam às necessidades da sua empresa e garanta múltiplas camadas de proteção em cada transação. ClearSale, one step ahead.
Today on CityCast Boise. The Treasure Valley hasn't always been a place that comes to mind when you think about sophisticated or elevated gallery shows, but former real estate agent turned viral painter Elijah McNeely wants to change that. He's discussing the impact that art has had on his life and why he wants art to be more accessible for the community. Plus, he'll explain why he thinks that exposure to abstract art could change Boise for the better. It's Tuesday, August 20th. I'm Lindsay Van Allen, and this is what Boise's talking about. How would you describe the Boise art scene currently, as it stands today?
It's growing. I think that's the best way to put it, is that it's growing. I still think, in my humble opinion, that it's still in its infancy phases. So yeah.
And you were an artist living in Chicago, doing well in Chicago. So what compelled you to come back to Boise to create art?
So, to be fair, I was kind of splitting my time back and forth, but I didn't feel that the opportunities were here for me. Mm-hmm. And just to be clear, I'm an abstract artist, contemporary. So that didn't really seem to fit into the Boise market as a whole. And somewhere like Chicago that's more established and has more galleries and more opportunities for artists such as myself seemed like the most attractive option, because why wait around for something that may or may not get built when I can just go and try and get my seat at the table somewhere big?
Yeah. Back
in March of this year, me and Tyler Crabb, we met here at the studio that we both work at, and we started talking about our vision and what we wanted out of life. And I kind of told him that. I was like, yeah, I think I'm ready to bug out full time to Chicago. I just don't see the opportunities here. And he kind of empathized with that as well. And after talking and getting to know each other, we kind of just had this idea of, why do we have to sit around and wait for what we want? Why do we have to run away from our home to get what we want? And we came up with the idea of putting on a show for just us two. We had 2.5 weeks to put it together. We put our heart and soul into it. We hoped that just more than our parents would show up. And we ended up having over 300 people come to that event. And people were engaged and they were locked in on a different level than I had ever experienced in the art world, and especially with something that was about me and Tyler, but like having my artwork shown in an environment that was like, this is it. This is what we've always wanted. And I cannot put into words how important that night was for me, for Tyler, for other artists in the community that were watching. And so after that night, that was that defining moment that was like, okay, it's here. People are ready. It's time to put it into action and build the community that we want.
And I guess, my next question for that is, you talked about how Chicago has this really established art scene. You were represented in Chicago. So I guess my question is, why? Why? There's so many places that already have these art scenes and galleries. Why are you working so hard to build an art scene here? Why is that so important to you?
Well, one, my parents live here, and they're very important to me. And that was always something that weighed on me a lot, having to leave them for realizing the opportunities were here. But I do love Boise. I think it's a great city. I think there's so much room to grow here. I think we're not there yet. I know some people want it to stay the same, and I understand that sentiment. But, having my experience of moving around when I was younger and then coming to Boise and seeing, wow, I never would have gotten those opportunities. I would not be here talking to you right now if I hadn't have moved here, because of this opportunity for growth in the Treasure Valley. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it sounds like you didn't want people to have to leave their home, move away from Boise to be successful in this field. That you
Correct.
wanted this to be a place where people could be artists and be successful.
Absolutely. And it's there's ways of doing things. There's ways that are taught that I think are antiquated. I think that having to live the big city dream and struggling and being a starving artist and trying to fight for scraps, and then hopefully someday, if you're still alive, you might get a taste of having the life that you've always wanted. And the dream is, oh well, you're famous when you're dead. Like, that's, you can get swallowed up from like these big cities. A lot of it has to do with connections, who are you a really outgoing person or are you not? I mean, all of these things can bury someone even if they do leave in search of something better, but there isn't that here. And like, there is real opportunity for people to grow and expand and experiment and try things outside of these archaic institutions that allow people to make a living, to make a life out of what they love to do.
I'm really curious, how did you get started as an artist? And do you think that maybe plays a role in impacting how you view the art industry?
1000%. So I did not grow up with art or music, really. It wasn't because it was forbidden or anything dramatic like that. It wasn't a priority. And I enjoyed looking from the outside into the art world, like, wow, that's really cool. Like, wow, what it would be like to be an artist. I remember so distinctly being in high school and seeing people just doodling on their notebooks. And I lived that way for 26 years, thinking that, always believing that I was not an artist or a creative. My background's in real estate. And it wasn't until when I was 26, I had a friend who was staying with me. He was going through some hard times and he was an artist. Like, I saw him throughout high school painting or sketching or drawing. And he was staying with me and he asked me, hey, I don't have a way to pay you back for, letting me stay at your place. I've got some paint in the car. Do you want to paint together? And my first instinct was like, well, you don't have to pay me back. This is what friends do. And also, I don't know how to paint and I don't know how to draw. So no thanks. And he gave me the greatest gift ever and was just like, just have fun. No one's watching. Just enjoy it. Just do whatever you feel you want to do. Don't worry about sceneries. Don't worry about shading or shadows or straight lines. Like, just have fun. And that moment changed my life forever. And that was 5 years ago, a couple weeks ago, would have
Oh,
been
wow.
5 years. And it is just unbelievable what my life has become in those past 5 years because I said yes to that moment. That one question, I said yes, and I just let go and I had fun, and it changed everything.
So do you think maybe that more unorthodox way of entering the art community or the art scene influences how you feel about how the art community has been in the past, or the exclusivity of it?
Yeah, I think it does give me that unique perspective because I was an outsider. I did not think that was for me. I did not have an education in art. I didn't take arts classes in high school or junior high or elementary. So that it literally seemed like there was a wall. And so now that I'm over that wall and I crossed that barrier, now I'm able to see how many other people, whether they're just from like the consumer standpoint, from people who just enjoy art to artists themselves, how that same feeling kind of manifests throughout. Whether it's, oh, I can't get to that next level. I can't make a living doing this, or I don't understand art. So why even try? Like, I don't get it, so it must be bad. I mean, I've lived every single one of those in all those different like positions in life as just a someone from the outside who looked at creatives, someone who enjoyed art but didn't understand it, to being an artist inside of being inside the walls of being an artist. Does that make sense? And
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
it gives me empathy for one, and it really shows me like the education side of things in terms of like making art accessible. and making a sophisticated experience accessible, and not just reserved for the high markets, high end, big cities, established galleries or museums, but to be able to bring it to somewhere like Boise that has not statistically been a place for art. And I'm saying that generally. I know that there's a lot of artists out there and a lot of great creatives in the Treasure Valley. I'm just saying from kind of that elevated experience, I think, it showed me that it can be accessible because I accessed it. I was able to climb over that wall and now I get to be a part of it. So why not share that with everyone else?
Quer desenvolver os talentos da sua equipe e potencializar os resultados da sua empresa? Conte com a expertise do atendimento corporativo do Senac São Paulo, que já capacitou mais de 1 milhão de pessoas e profissionais de instituições públicas, privadas e terceiro setor. Construa uma equipe altamente motivada e capacitada e destaque-se no mercado. Entre em contato, acesse sp.senac.br/corporativo e saiba mais. Quer saber? Senac.
So, Elijah, when you talk about developing art in Boise or elevating art in Boise, what does that mean? Like, what does that look like to you?
I think it comes back to the experience side. I don't think it's reserved to a specific location or specific artist. I think it's about creating an experience that draws people in, which allows more creativity and more experimentation with art that maybe hasn't been seen here before. We have this amazing building at the Gym Center for the Arts up here in Boise, and the owner has given us just so much freedom to really turn this space into what we hope will be kind of a mecca or a starting point for the art scene in Boise that maybe hasn't been served. And so location-wise, like we are actively we're rebranding the building. We're making it a place to be accessible to the community and to artists. So in that regard, the physical space is important, but as a whole, like it's really just about creating those experiences. But yeah, our original plan was like, okay, like we're gonna have to go find new space. Each time we're gonna move it around. And I'm not even saying that that's off the table. Like, I think it would be pretty rad to be able to travel around and like do this and to give that access to everyone.
It sounds like from what you've said that you and several artists and different groups are working together in this effort. Have you had support from other people in the community?
I would say yes, for the most part. I think people are excited about an idea, but I think they're all waiting around to see the execution. I think that's how it always goes, that people, pat you on the back and say, "Ooh, that would be cool. That sounds fun. That's interesting." But they're not really on board until they see it in action. And I totally get that.
Yeah. And I think that's an interesting point to bring up because I'm going to be so honest. When I think of Boise, and I think I'm probably not alone in this, I think I don't really picture a city with a sophisticated or elevated art gallery or these really elevated shows. So do you really think there's an interest or demand for that here? Do you think Boise's ready for that?
I absolutely do. And I don't think it would have been the case even just a couple years ago, especially going further and further back. No. But now, yes, having my background in real estate, I mean, I've met so many people that have moved here from these larger markets and they're trying to find some kind of balance between where they came from and where they are now. And art is such a big component of that. I mean, we have the better restaurants, we're getting better entertainment, you're seeing more infrastructure, all that stuff's great. But I think the art scene, like from a more gallery standpoint to event standpoints to the sophistication standpoint that you brought up, I just don't think that has followed as quickly behind all those other great aspects that draw people to Boise, that cause people to move here. So I Yeah, my answer is yes.
And I'm really curious because actually one of your shows was one of the first gallery shows I've ever been to. What are you and your team doing to make art accessible and welcoming, especially for people who are new to things like gallery shows? I know we have people moving here from other states who, bigger cities, but what about maybe the people here who haven't been to galleries before? How are you making that accessible?
Those are the people that we think of the most. We really learned from that first show the education standpoint. I had a young couple that came up and the guy was like, "Hey, congratulations. I really, really enjoyed my time here. I've never been to a show like this. I've never seen art like this. And it's really opened my eyes to this entirely different world where I get to kind of go feel, whether or not you dress up, but like a lot of people kind of dressed up and came and enjoyed themselves on this different level than I think any of them had experienced before, unless they came from a bigger city. And so we really keep that in mind of education is probably the biggest component, but the easiest way to do that is by just creating an environment to be free. Be free to enjoy the artwork, be free to enjoy and meet the artists, like have it not be on this pedestal, but it's right there in front of you. I mean, that is what it's all about.
What kind of an impact do you think this exposure and maybe encouraging this more nuanced way of thinking could have on the culture and community of Boise?
Well, I love Boise. I think things have been done a certain way for a very long time, and I don't think it's isolated to Boise. I think we're just as human nature, we like what we know, and we, whether it's through relationships, through education, through whatever avenue it is, we become entrenched in the ways that we believe, and we don't maybe necessarily know why. We just do. And I had a lot of that in my own life. And so I really, one of the big, I know I've said education and some of the other things that we're trying to do with these shows, but I mean, if we could just touch and impact people to just get that muscle working again, that would be the most amazing thing in the world.
Well, Elijah, thank you so much. That sounds incredibly powerful and something we definitely need here in Boise.
Thank you so much for having me, Lindsay. I really appreciate this opportunity to talk about my story and what we're doing. And just a reminder, we're going to be having a big open house at the Gem Center for the Arts on September 12th from 6 to 9, where we're going to be showcasing all kinds of different artists. We're going to have live music. It's going to be great. And I really think this is an opportunity for people to come out and experience what I've been talking about, see it in action.
Perfect. We will have a link to that in the show notes for everyone who's interested. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
That's all for today here on CityCast Boise. If you enjoyed the show, check out our Hey Boise newsletter for even more local events. We'll be back tomorrow morning with everything you need to know about Oahe Elementary School closing. You won't want to miss it.